I was at an event the other day with some people who, let's say, are a bit younger than me. And one guy who likes to get a rise out of people, he said, "Who really cares about the Beatles today? They're irrelevant." Now, I'm generally a pretty calm person, but I'm tired of hearing this. And it's not just a generational difference. I mean, the Beatles broke up long before I was born, but that doesn't mean that they're irrelevant. Now, likely this guy grew up listening to maybe different styles of music, maybe hip-hop, electronica, I don't know. But that still doesn't mean that the Beatles are irrelevant. It's like saying, I'm not interested in architecture, and therefore architecture is irrelevant, but you live in a building, right? And if you play music in any way, the Beatles are relevant. So let's look back at just some of the ways that I believe the Beatles still matter today, especially for us guitar players. Number 1, guitar innovation that changed the game. The Beatles were guitar pioneers, and the way I like to see it is their sound blended two very different things: the raw energy of rock and roll with harmonic sophistication. If you take a song like Drive My Car, at first listen, it's a simple song about, what is it about anyway? Driving a car? Or maybe that's a metaphor for something, I actually don't know. But anyway, the point is, it's full of great riffs that could easily have been taken from the Motown era, but add to it radical harmonic sounds like dominant sharp 9 chords. And still, the song is both catchy, but complex. These kinds of dissonant harmonies, they weren't new at the time, true. You could hear these kinds of chords in jazz, and long before then. But that's just the thing, right? It was their ability to experiment with the harmonic dissonance and yet create something incredibly catchy. They were able to borrow from other genres, very disparate genres, and yet still create something that was appealing to a broad range of people. It's experimental, but somehow still popular. Another good example is, what's with this wild C major chord in the middle of the chorus to I Saw Her Standing There? That song is in the key of E major, and last I checked, there is no C major chord in the key of E major. There isn't even a C natural note. But that chord is just thrown in there and somehow it lands perfectly. I don't know where they came up with that chord. Or have a listen to the chromatic sequences of George Harrison's song Something. Man, that solo is incredible, but also just the major 7 chord dropping to the dominant chord. The targeting of chord tones in that solo, it is incredible. It's one of the best guitar solos probably of all time. You can fight me on that one. But maybe the issue is really not so much that current popular music isn't influenced by the Beatles. Maybe it's more just that current popular music is so ridiculously simple, harmonically speaking, that it would be challenged to name a few artists who are really popular today who are heavily influenced by the Beatles. And if that's the case, maybe it's not that the Beatles are irrelevant, but that their incredible musical accomplishments have been forgotten by younger generations, and that's why so much of the popular music today is boring, kinda sucks. I don't know, you tell me. Number 2, studio wizardry and guitar tone. And of course, the Beatles didn't just play guitars, they pushed the boundaries of what guitars can do. From jangly Rickenbackers to fuzzed out Gretsch guitars, they may have started this obsession for guitar tone, this modern gear lust that we have. Because it seems to me that whenever I search for anything about guitar online, the majority of what I find is people talking about gear and people trying to sell you gear. Now, I wouldn't call George Harrison a gear snob, or John Lennon for that matter, but experimenters of guitar tone? Yeah, absolutely. They looked around the studio and tried to find whatever they could to get a different sound. And I think that's partly why sometimes it's hard to tell who played guitar on what song, because the guitar tones were constantly changing. They were always looking for something different. One of those new sounds was the Rickenbacker 12-string electric. That was something that came out when the Beatles were recording. Now, I wish I had one, but they're really expensive. And you can listen to that on John Lennon's arpeggio to Ticket to Ride. That A note just keeps ringing, but we get something like, see if I can remember it. It's like an A sus2 chord back to an A because that note keeps changing. But the A note drones on throughout that whole intro. And that's not to mention Ringo Starr's really cool drum pattern there. That is also unique. It almost sounds kind of exotic. It doesn't sound like something from England in the 1960s. And maybe that was the point. Many would say that that intro has influenced so many bands going forward, like The Smiths. Yeah, sure, that was a long time ago too. Johnny Marr played that, but keep in mind, Johnny Marr has been one of the highest paid studio musicians up until today, so he's still playing on all these records today, right? The experimental sound was also thanks to producer George Martin. They turned the studio into a playground. Some of their guitar sounds were groundbreaking, like the song Tomorrow Never Knows, John's droning tape-looped guitar through a Leslie speaker. It created a psychedelic vibe that thousands of bands have tried to replicate since, like Radiohead. Or a more obvious example, like the opening to the song Revolution. That crunchy, overdriven Vox AC30 is screaming. The amp is cranked, and it's practically the birth of hard rock. Plug into any distortion pedal today, and you're kind of chasing that sound. And there are incredible classic guitar tones too, like in While My Guitar Gently Weeps. George's soulful playing on is it a Les Paul or SG? I can't remember. And of course, Eric Clapton's guest spot on that song. That solo inspired so many guitar players since, like Slash of Guns N' Roses, who specifically mentioned that song, and John Mayer too. Their gear with the Rickenbackers, the Gretches, and the Epiphone Casino, they weren't just cool at the time, they defined an era, and today's boutique amp makers are still trying to replicate some of these sounds with pedals or whatever you got, right? These classic Vox and Fender tones are so memorable, and we're still buying some of those guitars today, right? Number 3, songwriting that guitarists cannot ignore. For guitar players, the Beatles' songwriting is a gold mine. I mean, how many times have I, as a guitar teacher, taught the song Blackbird, Paul McCartney's fantastic fingerstyle song? I learned it when I was a kid, and I'm still teaching it today. That technique, we could call these tenths, right? It's in so many different songs today. I mean, walk through the grocery store and you're gonna hear a song like 4-Leaf Clover on there. Or what's the other guy? James Bay, his song Let It Go. I mean, there's so many songs, especially from the millennial generation. Now, Paul McCartney didn't invent that concept, but he sure made one of the best songs. No, the best song. The best song using that technique for sure. And it's because these shapes are just so good, right? The concept itself is both like fretboard economy and beauty all in one. Or how about a simple song like Let It Be? The chord sequence to that song must have been used in millions of ballads since then. And some of those songs even use pieces of The Walk, you know? I mean, you know the one. Or how about the Mixolydian ending to Hey Jude? You know the na 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 part. That truly the best chord progression in the world. That's what I call that. And makes sense. It became the basis. I mean, it's so epic. It just wants to go on forever, right? It's that Mixolydian sound. It's that modal thing that doesn't really fully resolve. And it becomes the basis for so many other great songs like Sweet Child of Mine. Even Sympathy for the Devil is basically the same. Did that one come first? I'm not sure. Which came first, Hey Jude or Sympathy for the Devil? Anyway, the Beatles songs taught following generations how to write hooks that really stick. And modern pop stars, name whoever you like, Billie Eilish, Harry Styles, whatever. So many of these artists will cite the Beatles as influences. Or look how us guitar players share tabs and covers online daily, keeping these Beatles songs alive. There's over 30 monthly Spotify streams of the Beatles catalog, and That's this many years later. That's saying something. 4. Cultural impact. Now, the Beatles weren't just musicians, they were a movement in a way. Their guitar-driven sound fueled the 60s counterculture, and that energy still inspires today. For example, Helter Skelter practically invented the heavy metal genre with its raw, distorted riffs. You can hear it in Black Sabbath or Motorhead. Now you might say that those bands are really old too, but believe me, heavy metal is still going strong today. Now, I don't think that we have quite the same cultural movement today that the Beatles had in the 60s. I wasn't around, but based on what I read, it's not the same. Sure, there are plenty of people who idolize Taylor Swift, and it's not just kids, it's often parents too. But it seems to me that the Swifties would be Swifties and the others are just not, right? But the Beatles, rock and roll was truly something that shaped everything from fashion to politics to culture to travel, or whatever you could say this was. And you could say that today's stars owe a lot to the Beatles' charisma and presence with the media. They basically set the playbook for today's artists who use the media like a tool now. Well, they need the media. The Beatles knew how to play the media, sometimes with humor. They were always joking around. They even created the first ever full-length music video, basically a long advertisement, that was the movie called A Hard Day's Night. How's that for a lesson on media relations? But they also knew how to use controversy to get attention, like when John Lennon said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. Did they do it on purpose to get attention? I don't know, but I'd say that many artists since the Beatles certainly have been controversial on purpose just to get attention. Essentially, the Beatles showed us how to be artists on a world stage. Number 5, why do the Beatles still matter to guitar players in 2025? Their memorable riffs, experimental guitar tones, and songs are always in your hands every time you pick up a guitar. They taught us to experiment, to feel, and to connect through music. Whether you're ripping on the opening to Revolution, or gently playing Blackbird fingerstyle acoustic, or writing your own songs, the Beatles are probably in there somewhere. My name is Blue Morris, and I teach guitar lessons right here in Vancouver and on Patreon. You can try out those lessons online free for 7 days. The link to that is below. Or you can try this video right here that YouTube seems to think you'll really like. I'll see you soon.